Welcome to today's webinar, Tech Training Bad Habits Die Hard, brought to you by Pest Management Professional Magazine and by our sponsor, Control Solutions Incorporated. I'm Rick Uldrich from North Coast Media, publisher of Pest Management Professional Magazine, and I'll be your event manager. Before we get started, I want to let you know that today's webinar will be recorded. You are currently in listen-only mode. The recording will be available 2 weeks from today on our website, www.mypmp.net/webinars. A link to the on-demand recording will also be emailed to you when it is available. At this time, I'd like to acquaint you with the ways in which you can participate during today's presentation. Please notice in the lower left-hand corner of your console that there is a Submit button. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Just type in the text box at the bottom left, then click Submit to place your question in the queue. Questions that were submitted during the registration may be covered in this webinar. Some questions may also be answered in an upcoming issue of Pest Management Professional Magazine or in one of our weekly e-newsletters. We strive to answer as many of your questions as possible. Finally, if you experience any technical difficulties during today's event, select Help to submit your issue, and assistant producer Bethany Chambers or myself will personally assist you. Now I'd like to turn today's event over to our moderator, Will.
Hi, this is Will Nepper. I'm managing editor for Pest Management Professional Magazine, and I'll be moderating today. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Marie Knox, PCO and Technical Manager for Control Solutions Incorporated. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you, Will, and thank you everybody who's taken time out of their busy schedules to attend today's webinar. Like Rick said, it is Technician Training, Bad Habits Die Hard. We're going to cover several topics, including training and putting together standard operating procedures, and we'll touch on some specifics as far as segments of your business, but it'll be a little more generalized. Normally, we answer questions at the end after the presentation. However, one question came in during registration that I wanted to handle up front. And that question was, will this qualify for CEUs? And unfortunately, the answer to that question is no. Getting CEU approval for 50 states could be a bit time-consuming and difficult. So just so you know, for today's presentation, you will not be able to get CEUs. So I hope that that doesn't disappoint too many people. Well, moving on with it, we are going to get into the program. Some of the topics we're going to cover today include my own training experiences with companies of all sizes, a simple review of how people learn, analysis of some recent technician training surveys that I deployed to companies of various sizes across the United States, and some of you who answered my survey might even be on the call, tips and tricks you can incorporate into your current training program or to help you get started in putting together your own SOPs, standard operating procedures, and technician training programs. SOPs and training manuals are almost always a work in progress, so believe me, your programs will change over time, especially as you and your company grow. And then we'll handle the questions from the audience. Over the last 13 or so years, I've been able to participate in training technicians, managers, and sales teams for companies of all sizes, from the one-man operator just starting out to the companies with national footprints and every size in between. One of the most profound realizations is that regardless of the size, all companies need solid, new hire, and effective continuing training programs to ensure their continued growth and success over time. Do you have a training program in place for a newly hired technician? Do you have standard operating procedures for the different facets of your business, whether they're indoor general pest control, inspection and application, perimeter pest control inspection and application, termite work, inspection and treatment, or lawn care inspection and application? If the answer is yes, you have all of these in place, that is awesome. Hopefully, if you hang with us today, I can help add to what you currently have or help you think of things in a different manner. And if the answer is no, you don't have these things either formally written down or established yet in your business, don't worry. We will get you started building your programs by the end of this one. Standard operating procedures can be as complex or as simple as you make them. You're completely in control of them. They do need to touch on the how, the who, what, where, when, and why. Those are your main questions you want to answer. So how do you inspect or how do you make applications? Who is involved? As far as the chain of command, who might handle issues if your technician comes in with a trouble call or a question from the field? What do your standard operating procedures encompass? What pests? What types of structures maybe? What products you use in your company? When to treat or when not to treat? And the why. Why do you do any of the above? And providing drawings can help technicians know where your company applies certain products and why, as well as areas to inspect. Having SOPs established and written down may even help reduce your liability later on. All right, so when we are done today, if you don't already have SOPs or training manuals in place, you should at least have an idea of what is available to you, the resources that are out there, and many of them are free, and how you may want to tackle putting it all together. And if you do already have a system for training in place and in writing, you may just walk away with some new ideas and material to freshen up your current program. So let's get started. Training may not look or feel the same for a company with 1 to 5 techs as it may for one with more than 50 technicians. But what is important to realize is that the same general concepts exist and need to be addressed. Training doesn't need to be fancy or expensive. There are many resources available to you that we'll get to later on in the program, actually several slides of lists of them, that are simple and much of the time free. The big investment any company needs to make, however, is time. Time to devote to regular training meetings and exercises, as well as time to create simple, organized training plans for new hires and long-term employees alike. So we all learn differently. I think you'll all tend to agree with me on that. So let's talk a little bit about learning in general. Some people can read a paragraph and take a quiz, no problem, they ace it. Others need to actually see the job or task being performed in addition to the reading in order to score well, if you will, on the quiz. I'm a little of both, and over the years I've worked with many PMPs, and the most successful training programs I've witnessed are ones that include both of those aspects, the classroom or book learning, as well as the hands-on or visual learning. Since we all learn differently, our training program should be varied enough to include hands-on in the field, online or video modules, reading and quizzes, and make your quizzes fun so that they're not torture for your employees or those involved taking the quizzes. And vary the speakers. If you invite different speakers in, vary them. Vary the presenters if possible so that it provides a little bit of excitement, and the information coming from different people sometimes helps it to sink in with your technicians. Give each tech, this is actually a suggestion that came from the survey that I deployed, giving each technician or even your customer service representative or anybody else who you invite into the training meetings, give them an insect or a topic to research. It doesn't have to be, Encyclopedia Britannica research. It can be just a 10 to 15-minute presentation at each meeting to help get people involved and make them think about their jobs and how they do their business in a different manner. And then there's always some other ideas and suggestions. One last note before we get to the survey. Whether you've been on the job 20 years or 20 minutes, you need training. It is human nature to try to make our jobs easier or go faster, but much of the time that involves creating shortcuts that over time may end up hurting our level of service and lower our productivity and profitability. Regular, continued training helps to bring us all back to the basics, so we're less likely to reinforce any developing bad habits. Okay, the Great Training Survey. This was a lot of fun, and just a little bit of a background on it. I use a free service called surveymonkey.com, and it's something that you could actually do in your own business. You could survey your technicians. You could survey your whole company. You could use it for a number of different things, and it's free and it's helpful, and the responses are anonymous, so you never know who said what, which is kind of nice, especially for the people responding. And the other part, though, is that you might not get responses from absolutely everybody that you send the survey out. And as an example, I sent my survey out to 54 different companies, and I had 18 responses. And some of you might be laughing at my lack of responses, but that's actually not so bad. You might want to count on, you'll definitely get less than half of the people responding to your survey, but don't take it personally, because we all on a daily basis probably get surveys deployed to our emails, and how many of the times do you just click delete? I know that I do, so I'm just happy with the responses that I do get. So I sent out this survey to companies of all sizes across the country, asking them if they have formal technician training programs in place, and if so, how do they train, and what do they include as training methods and content. So we're going to take a look at some of the questions, and as we discuss the findings, we'll get into the tips and the tricks you can add to your own training arsenal. The first question was very simple. I just wanted to see kind of the spread, if you will, the number of companies with the number of technicians. I wanted to see the different sizes of companies that might be responding to my survey. So how many technicians does your company have? And we actually had a pretty good response, almost even among all the different groups. I listed the choices as 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 50, and then more than 50. So there were companies of varying sizes represented, and I think each segment was well represented in the survey. The fun thing about data and these responses, because that's what you are getting back is data, is that you can look at it several different ways. We could have split up the groups into 3 different groups, 10 or less, 11 to 30, or 31 and more. But for this example, I just happened to split it into 2 different groups because it looked pretty easy. So the technicians, or the companies with less than 30 technicians, represented about just under 60% of our answers, while the companies with more than 30 technicians represented about 40%, a little bit more than 40%. So the second question was, how many times per month do you provide some type of technician training? It could be anything. And I did provide some examples to spur some thinking. And it was classroom, inviting a representative. Did they handle biology or discuss insect biology? Did they provide hands-on training like drawing graphs or math to determine area? And overwhelmingly, the number of times that the companies who responded did any of these type of trainings was once per month. And since once per month was the most common answer, it totally seemed to jive with my experience so far. I think once per month gives you the opportunity to touch base with everyone, check in, and see what might be going well or not so well, and root out any bad habits that you may see developing. Rewarding good habits on a regular basis could also become part of your training meetings. And remember, a lot that we're presenting can be pretty general, so it doesn't have to be the rule. You can train more or less than once a month. It's totally up to you and what works for your company. Just understanding the importance of training is really the main goal of today. So the third question, and I promise we won't be going through every question on the survey. The third question is, what types of technician training does your organization offer? And I allowed them to check everything that applied. So 100% of the respondents have ride-alongs with the more seasoned techs. So they take a younger or a newer or a less experienced technician and have them ride along with the seasoned technicians. The other training opportunities were in-house regular scheduled trainings, and that's great. Nearly 80% already have regular scheduled trainings. Some have occasional in-house training. Others offer hands-on, which is nice, seeing that near 80%. I was very impressed to see that half of the respondents actually do offer insect biology. I just threw that one in there just to see. So that's kind of nice. I wasn't expecting 50% there. And then a very high percentage for inviting a distributor or a manufacturer rep and label review training. So again, very impressed with nearly 80%, especially on the label review training. And then you'll see a little box down there, Other. And let's take a look at what the other was in the survey. So for that question, the other, I was able to go in, and this is a neat thing about the survey platform that I used, is you get to see the responses they type in. And again, it's anonymous. I don't know who typed it in. So these, I thought, all 5 were great additional training topics. And they were all different, which I thought was great. So those 5 were defensive driver training. If anyone's driving a fleet vehicle or a company vehicle, I think it's imperative that they have driver safety or defensive driver training. CEU presentations, that's wonderful. I offer a lot of CEU presentations. I'm in Florida, and so I speak for my state association many of the months out of the year. And I love it when I see not just owners and managers coming in for CEUs, but also when they bring in their technicians or their customer service representatives. I think the third one was meant to be PPE and core instead of PPP and core, but that's all right. So again, a wonderful training topic. Fourth was safety. And there's safety in all aspects of our job that we should take a look at, not just driving. There's safety with handling products. There's safety with storage. There's simple workplace safety, not leaving things in the paths of where people are walking. So safety is a pretty great topic and a pretty broad one that you could work into your training programs or your monthly meetings or your scheduled meetings. And then lastly, this one must be from Florida because it's a review of IFAS documents, and they also, and that's the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. Maybe it's not from Florida, but it kind of leads me to believe it might be. And this respondent also remarked that they also allow their technicians to present a pest and a training topic to control the pest. So that's where I got that last idea from in a previous slide. So I thought these were all really great additional training topics. This was simply the breakdown. And notice that all of the respondents to this question of the various types of training offered, 100% marked ride-alongs with the more seasoned technicians. And the importance in that being the top answer, being ride-alongs, it's really that it's very important and should be continued, in my opinion. We all need that visual, hands-on experience, and it's imperative that a new technician learns what they need to do in the field and what is expected of them and how to inspect and how to apply. But we need to be aware that sometimes bad habits or shortcuts could be passed on with each generation, if you will, of technician in your company. And over time, what could happen in the field or what is happening in the field may not necessarily match your original SOP or what you originally intended. So how do we counteract this passing of the bad habit torch? We train, and retrain, especially when we think we know it all or have seen it all. We train. Sometimes it just takes thinking about what we do in a different way for things to click. And I apologize for all the words on this slide. You don't have to read it. I know it's exceptionally wordy. But it's a little story that I wanted to tell. I was recently training on lawn rig calibration, as exciting as that is, and used an analogy comparing lawn rigs to racehorses. I said, think about it. You don't change the horse for the jockey. You fit the jockey to the horse. The same goes for your lawn rigs. You figure out their flow rates, and you use that information to train that technician how much volume they're putting out over a certain area during a period of time. All of your lawn trucks will put out 5 gallons of water in different amounts of time. You cannot expect them all to be the same, the trucks. What you can do, however, is to make sure that each tech knows the information for their individual trucks. And this whole racehorse analogy just came to me. And it seemed to make sense to me. And the neat part was it actually clicked with a longtime business owner that was in my audience. So the moral of the story is that I received a great compliment from a longtime business owner. He's owned his company for 37 years. And he said he had never thought about it that way, and it made sense to him, thinking about it like the racehorse analogy, and he thought that that would also click with his text. So it's really just about thinking about things in a different manner or trying to explain them in a different way, because we all are very different. We all come from different backgrounds, and presenting things in different ways will hopefully click with a broader audience. So while we're on the subject of calibration, here are some nifty exercises you can do either as a technician or as a trainer. We have everybody on this call, so I just want to make sure that I reach out and provide information for everyone. And this will only help to increase everyone's success and profitability. So this is kind of a neat little exercise. You can see what 1,000 square feet actually looks like. You know, our labels, whether they're a general pest control perimeter spray type label or a turf label or ornamentals, you'll realize that they all pretty much reference 1,000 square feet, especially in their 8 tables. So use your measuring wheel and mark it out with some stakes or cones, and I'll show you some pictures in a few slides. And you can practice walking this area at each person's normal pace. So you can let everybody take a look at what the 1,000 square feet looks like. You can let them count their paces if you want. I personally, I support using the measuring wheel, but I also, just for fun, wanted to see how many paces at my natural walk it took to hit 50 feet, and it happens to be 18. So let everyone get a feel for what the size of area looks like, and then compare it to something memorable, like it looks like 6 parking spots. Believe it or not, it actually does. Or it's 1/3 of a tennis court. So I went ahead and did this exercise at a nearby neighborhood park, getting a bunch of interesting looks from the parents with their kids. And this is what it looks like. Now, it really is roughly 6 parking spaces. The standard, I learned, the standard size for a parking space is 9 feet wide by 18 feet deep. And it can vary depending on which state you're in and what rules they have. But this technically works out to 972 square feet, 54 feet long there by 18 feet. So it's roughly 6 standard parking spaces. If you go ahead and lay this same idea out in turf, you can let everyone have a spin around it with their normal spreader, so they can even practice what it feels like walking with a spreader, obviously with no product in it, of course, just to get a feel for it. This is a great thing to do with a brand new hire, some of your newer techs, and it's also good to have some of your older or longer term technicians just kind of brush up on these types of basics. This area actually is 1,000 square feet exactly. It's 50 feet by 20 feet, and you see my handy little measuring wheel in the photograph. So in addition to doing that exercise and taking some pictures, and you could incorporate that into a training manual, it's also a good idea to take a look at what rates for your favorite products, and in this example it's granular products, actually look like. So there are some products that call for using the cap of the plastic container for measuring out a granular bait. So 2 capfuls to one person might mean 2 heaping capfuls, while to somebody else it might mean 2 level capfuls, and so on. So if you're building an SOP or a training manual and it's a physical in-your-hand manual, it might be helpful to take pictures of what these amounts of product look like. Across all the companies that I've been able to work with, I have noticed, you have your favorite products that you use, and you use them regularly on a regular basis. So it's not a bad idea to go ahead and kind of incorporate this in photographs into your manuals. And remember, we all learn a little differently from one another, so pairing a picture with an amount might help the person learning to make a stronger connection. And I know that this all may sound very elementary, but it's always a good refresher, so you're not putting out too much or too little product, and wondering either why you're spending a ton on products, or even worse, why your callbacks are skyrocketing. It helps to add consistency across the board for your technicians and for your product usage. So did you realize that 1,000 square feet goes for general pest control applications as well? Think about it. If you're applying a certain product in a 10-foot band, and again, I will repeat, this is all very general, but it's just an example for you guys, so I'm not talking about any specific product. But if you're applying a certain product in a 10-foot band around a 200 linear foot structure, so say it's 3 feet up the wall and 7 feet out, you're applying to an area of 2,000 square feet. And if this fictitious product that I'm talking about, if that label calls for 1 ounce of product in 1 gallon of water per 1,000 square feet as your volume, then you'll be putting 2 ounces of product in 2 gallons of water for this example. Pretty simple. But over the years, unfortunately, I've gotten a lot of questions of, well, how many ounces do I put in my 100-gallon tank? And I always have to ask, well, how many square feet does your 100-gallon tank cover? And then I usually get some questioning looks back, and we have to go back to calibration and figuring it out. And then I help them get a little more streamlined in their product usage and their applications, and oftentimes it ends up saving money. You can think about lawn applications as well. And a lawn application might call for 1 ounce of a product per 1,000 square feet in 4 gallons of water. So we're really talking about volume here too, and rate. And that 4 gallons is going to cover 1,000 square feet, and you're treating a 5,000 square foot lawn. Well, if it's 1 ounce per 1,000, you need 5 ounces of product in 20 gallons of water, because it's 4 gallons per 1,000 square feet, and that gives you the 20. So this is where we really need to review our labels and double check that flow output of the rigs. And backpacks, B&Gs are a little easier, but it's very important to do this on a very regular basis. All right, so here's the most important part in my opinion. We're going to start building training programs. And it's not rocket science to put together a sound, well-rounded training program for your company that trains not only your new folks, but also your seasoned professionals. It can take some time and effort, and I know this is where many companies get stuck. I know that finding time can be very difficult. I personally find it difficult to find, quote unquote, find time on a daily basis. I feel like I have so many other things to do. But if you can find the time to dedicate to either brushing up what you already have as training manuals, or bringing them up to date with the newer labels or newer techniques, or if you're in the process of just building them for the first time, finding the time will pay off. It helps you get consistent. And getting consistency in your inspections and your treatments, and having consistency across all of your technicians, new or seasoned, will allow you to pinpoint issues faster, and eventually it will help you better manage your materials use and costs. Because Route A won't be so out of line with materials use compared to Route B, if you get my drift with consistency. When we have people doing it relatively the same way across the board and using the correct rates across the board, if you see a spike later on in a certain route's product usage, you can ask some questions and figure out what might be going on. So finding the time is really the hardest part, and setting aside, this might be a little bit much, a day a week, or even a day a month to work on it. You could even shoot for 1 hour a week to work on a program or getting SOP written. It can be a small, manageable time investment to create a great program. So something really important to remember before we start building these programs is that they're not set in stone. Your training program and materials can and will change, and they'll vary depending on a lot of scenarios. So don't feel like your program has to be perfect before you roll it out. Don't feel like you have to have an SOP written for absolutely every facet of the business. Just start with one. Heck, start with interior pest control inspection. Write down the way you want your company to do it, and then roll that out. Don't wait till you have collected all of your SOPs, because it just might be too late. Go one at a time. It's always going to be a work in progress, and you're always going to revisit them and make some tweaks and changes. Encourage a few of your technicians to look over what you've put together, because remember, they're your front line. They're out there. They're touching the real life situations, and they might enjoy being involved in some of the creation of these programs. Make them part of the process as you refine and tweak your programs. Simple, simple, simple. Simple is best, and inexpensive is even better. So not only should programs, whether they're your training programs, your monthly classes, or your standard operating procedures, should they be relatively easy to organize, but it should also not cost an arm and a leg. Many training tools are available now that are free. Yes, free. You just have to know where to look for them. And our industry is full of them. So let's take a look at a few of the freebies out there. YouTube. Believe it or not, YouTube videos from trusted sources like universities or product manufacturers or magazines like PMP Magazine. I just learned actually we'll be putting some things up on YouTube in the near future. Your distributors and any industry experts, well-respected experts out there. Videos from trusted sources can easily be integrated especially into your company meetings. It could be a regular company meeting. It could be a specific training meeting. And, the videos can range in length, from a few minutes to maybe 20, 30 minutes. But what a great free training tool that's out there and available to you. You just have to take the time to search for it. Second, hands-on calibration. Hey, it's free. You just have to set aside the time. You already have the equipment. Maybe buy a couple cones. Most companies have some of those fancy cones you saw in my picture. But monthly hands-on calibration and equipment training, that's a cool free class you could offer. And practical math. Who doesn't love math? Everyone loves math. I know you guys are probably all smirking. But a skills review, believe it or not, a skills review every couple of months or so is very helpful. Label reviews. You can call on your qualified distributor or manufacturer representatives. They know their labels better than most, and they can also help guide you on where their products work best and where they don't. And they can also update you on label changes. So don't be afraid to ask your distributor and your manufacturer reps that you do business with to come on by and visit and spend some time training, especially on their labels. And then you can also create a label quiz. Quizzes don't have to be tough or boring. You can make them fun and easy for any product label that you have. You can also have a quiz on maybe if you get your inspection SOP up and running and in writing, you could have a little quiz on that. You could also think about small prizes. They're also a fun idea if you're having quizzes. And we're all inherently competitive, so you may end up creating a fun little competition among your technicians or all of your employees during your training classes with quizzes. You could also do a PPE quiz or a rate quiz using labels and using the rate charts and labels. Some distributors have websites, and if you're a customer, you can log in and print examples of contracts and inspection forms, again, for free. It's very helpful when you're building your own training manuals and gathering up your own forms and paperwork or just double-checking what you might already have. So this saves time. Like I mentioned, it's oftentimes free to their customers. And it's not just distributors, manufacturers, some have them too. And sometimes there's even training videos. State websites may also offer free forms for you to use, so why create the wheel? Or you could, take them and tweak them, fit them to your company. Some states, now remember, might make it mandatory for you to use certain forms for some of the categories, and then they might also offer free examples for other categories. So just keep in mind, always abide by your state rules. This happens to be a form from the state of Florida. And then leading universities with really strong entomology, agronomy, plant pathology courses, etc. Universities are great to tap into. A lot of them just have online publications, out the wazoo, tons of stuff. And sometimes the graduate students must produce online publications as part of their programs. And I did. At UF, it's called Featured Creatures. I love that name. And this is where I think you could have a technician pick a creature from the website, print it out, and teach it to or present it to your company once per month. It really doesn't have to be difficult or scary or even involve a lot of time. You're really just searching and clicking print and then presenting the information. And just by doing those simple things, everybody learns a little bit more. State and industry associations may also offer free to their members contract examples, forms, graphing guides, training opportunities. I mentioned before, almost monthly I'm offering a CEU class somewhere in the state of Florida, and they're generally free. Most people just have to pay for their lunch. Discounts. This is also getting a little off topic, but it's good to know that if you do belong to a national or a state association, oftentimes there's perks or discounts that are available to you, and you just have to ask. Sometimes the associations don't do too great of a job of letting you know everything that's available to you, so just call them up and ask or take a look around their website and see what they might have. You don't need to feel overwhelmed or alone. There are so many resources available to you in our industry. It's a wonderful, wonderful industry to be in. So check your publications, your magazine subscriptions, and the magazine websites for training topics. and even in-depth articles on specific pests, and you can start building a resource library. If you have specific questions, maybe inspection or training manuals that you need for something specific, like say bed bugs or for termites, those are also available usually through different universities and through national and state association sites. They might sell manuals and sell inspection forms that are when things start getting very specific, they might not be free, but just know that there's a lot of information out there available to you. So let's create an organized program. So we covered a little bit about how people learn, some tips and tricks, some ideas for classes, some ideas for training topics, and then we covered all of those freebies that are out there. Now let's take all those bits and pieces and organize them into a standard operating procedure, an SOP, and this example is going to be the general pest control indoor, okay, the indoor pest control SOP. What you'll see on your screen is just like the most simplistic outline ever. It just says GHP. I have both listed because we've got people from all over the country, and it's either called General Household Pest or General Pest Control for the GPC. So you'll see there's your title. Now just start thinking about, if you're sitting down to write this SOP, use this outline and just start thinking about the general steps, the simple steps. The first thing I have is inspection techniques, and flesh that out. How does your company do an inspection for interior pest control? And just write it down. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare. It doesn't have to be super fancy. You could have bullet points. The second topic, conducive conditions to look for. And again, through this SOP, you're communicating to the people who work for you, what to look for and what your company does and why and how you do it. So you list the conducive conditions to look for. You give them the third bullet point under here, cultural techniques. You could touch on sanitation, on clutter control, on food storage options, both for pet food and for human food. And you could just write a little blurb about each thing. And what's great about the cultural section, the cultural techniques or cultural controls section, is that these oftentimes become the talking points that your technicians can use when they're talking with a homeowner or just the owner of the structure that's being treated, and letting them know that there are some steps that could be taken to help alleviate the problem. The fourth point would be getting into the application itself. Obviously, you've got to read your labels. You could list the products that you use. You could do it several different ways. If I just have baiting and liquid sprays and dusts. Remember, this is very generalized, and I want you to take it and tweak it for yourself. You could have 10 different types of application tools or techniques under there if you wanted to, or you could have just one. It's all up to you. But use your labels and name your product specifically, and make sure that especially this section, you're brushing up on it. And just in case there's label changes, which there have recently been some label changes, across the board with some specific chemistries, you'll have to kind of update this section a little more often than others. So be aware of that. But you could talk about baiting. This would be a nice place to put some pictures. You could show what a proper bait placement, if you're using a gel bait, what the size actually looks like, and compare it to something easy like the size of a pea. So seriously, take a photograph of a proper bait placement from a gel bait and put a pea in the picture. I know this might sound a little bit nutty, but when you have something to compare it to, it just makes it click a little bit better. Liquid sprays, you could list where the sprays are applied and where they're not applied. And then the same thing with dust. how it goes out. You could talk about equipment in this section, how it's used. You can even have an equipment maintenance section or make that an SOP all by itself. Having checklists is really helpful. This is an interior GHP inspection checklist. So you can take that skeleton or outline that we just touched on in the previous slide, and you could have that, your beginning of your SOP, and then underneath the inspection part, you could have a small picture like this of your form, maybe with some arrows pointing to each section, and some explanations of how you would fill the areas out, and go step by step through that form. This form just by itself could be a monthly meeting topic. It's great to bring everybody back to the basics again. You'll hear me say that a million times because I truly believe in a strong foundation gives you a much better business path, a more profitable and efficient business path. So come back to this basics, and here, in my opinion, you have a monthly meeting right there on your screen just going over interior GHP inspections and going over your checklist. Visuals or pictures of how and where to inspect and treat are very helpful in a training manual. And they support the inspection and application checklists you may have or intend to make. So let's take a look at just a few inspection and treatment photos for kitchens and interior pest control. And I'm showing you these just because it's an example. Now in this there happens to be some treatment going on, but if you were just pulling the drawers out or maybe opening up the cabinets or taking that drawer out from underneath the stove to inspect and shining a flashlight, you could take photographs of any of those things and put them in your manual as a great visual to support the words of the manual. Nice kitchen, isn't it? And it's not mine. It's a really fancy kitchen. This one happens to show you that the switch plate cover was taken off. So again, those are some things you could include in your how-to section of how to inspect and how to treat. Now, this could go a couple ways with this picture. He could be inspecting the weather stripping. Doors are great pest entry points. So maybe, working on exclusion. Now he happens to be doing some application. It's just you can't see the can very well in his hand. But you could point out several things about this picture in your manual. And again, just examples. Here's an outdoor kitchen. Again, super fancy. He happens to be just simply doing an inspection here. And it's great to support the words of your manuals with visuals. So we touched on the interior pest control skeleton. Now training, and let me take a step back for 1 second. Training and SOPs are a massive topic. And to try to cover absolutely everything in 1 hour in depth is, in my opinion, impossible. So we're just really touching on the important sections, and we can't really get into each and every aspect of our business. So I wanted to cover the interior pest control, and now we're going to take a peek at perimeter pest control. And if we have specific topics, we will get into them in the questions if we have some time. And you can always, my email's at the end, you can always email me directly. So we did touch on the interior. Now this slide deals with the skeleton, if you will, or the outline for outdoor pest control, so perimeter pest control. And again, your touch points in your SOP, to me, this little outline is a nice little skeleton that you can flesh out for an SOP for perimeter pest control. You have inspection techniques, what to look for, like the conducive conditions, the pests, the clutter, etc. Cultural control methods, and just some examples, web removal, clutter control, downspout redirection, etc. Then you can get into the different application techniques and the equipment that you might use in your business. And again, read the labels. This is the how. how do you do the treatment. How could also apply to the inspection as well. But for these techniques, you could cover whether you do power spraying, if you use a backpack or a B&G, the types of products, the formulations you use. Are they liquids? Are they granules? Is it a bait? Is it contact? Is it a residual product? So you can cover all of that in that section. And then I love application maps and diagrams. So the techs know what goes where. So in the next picture you're going to see, you'll see it's broken down in zones, which is one of my favorite ways to teach perimeter inspection and pest control. So zone 1 would be the surface of the structure or the immediate perimeter. Zone 2 could be some outlying mulched beds and landscape perimeter and turf. And zone 3 could be some other areas or structures like a pool or pump house or wood piles. So here's this perimeter zone diagram that I'm, shamelessly in love with. The drawing is courtesy of a friend of mine at Black Pest, so I appreciate that. I always like to give a shout out when people share information, allow me to use it. So this is the perimeter zone diagram. Pretty simple. Zone 1, 2, and 3, like we just touched on in the previous slide. And I just feel it's so helpful if you can go over this, add it to your SOP, add it to your training manual. It really shows your technicians and your inspectors and even your sales guys, where are places to inspect, number one, and then also where you can put certain products. Very helpful in my opinion. Visuals are awesome tools. So like I said, we can't cover absolutely every topic of our business today. So I threw some visuals in here for termite inspection. But using pictures and maps and drawings to help illustrate inspection and application techniques is so important. Many pictures can be found online for free. Google has been a great friend of mine throughout my career. But make sure to get permission from the image owner if that is required, especially if you're ever going to use a photograph or a drawing or a schematic outside of your business, not just for internal training, then make sure you hunt down who owns that photograph so you can give them proper credit and not infringe on their copyright. So here's a couple that I found online for termite inspection, and they include construction types. So the picture on the right is a crawl space showing where termites can get in, where you might find some tubes. On the left is that exterior insulation system that causes so many people headaches. And it's great, when you train on termites to load up on the construction drawings and schematics because most people haven't seen that. It's kind of a foreign topic to a lot of people, but when you can actually see it in a cross-section like this, it helps. It helps to put the pieces together and realize exactly where those termites are getting in or where they could be getting in or where the problem spots might be. A couple exterior treatment diagrams, more visuals. These came from last month's webinar that we did on the pyrethroid label revisions and changes this past April. And again, these are just some simple drawings that you might use. Heck, you don't have to get fancy. You don't have to use Photoshop. You could print out a picture of your own house and use a highlighter and show where, the product gets applied if you want. It doesn't have to be super fancy, but the visuals certainly drive home the point of where products go. And then I know that you guys can't get enough of math. So I'll end or get near the end with some math training visual aids. Area is my favorite thing to teach. A times B gives you your area. So it's just that cute little box up in the upper right-hand corner. And then I'm pretty proud. I was a computer wizard to make the pre-treat. That's actually a graph that I use with the A's and the B's and the C's and the D's on it that I use for a quiz in a pre-treat, a termite pre-treat application training program. So you can make these. They're very easy. Throw some numbers in there, and you have an instant quiz on, in this case, calculating the necessary rates and volumes for pre-treat. Again, everybody loves math. Wrapping it up, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy day to attend the webinar. I want to thank Pest Management Professional for having me here. I enjoy doing these webinars, and I hope you all have enjoyed it as well. Be sure to check us out at controlsolutionsinc.com and mypmp.net. And I believe now will be the time that Will and I will handle questions.
Yep, that was a great webinar, Marie. Thank you for that. We've got a handful of questions here. I'll start with this one. Do you have any training tips for termite ID and application specifically?
I knew I probably should have expounded a little bit more in there. But yes, actually, it's a great question. Termites, they can be, I would think, well, in my opinion, an exciting, but at times difficult segment of the business. As far as ID tips, I would suggest focusing on the termite species that you have active in your area or your region where you do business. You can tap into resources that maybe your surrounding universities or universities that are well known for their termite programs, anything that they might offer as far as each species' distinct habits, swarm times, biology. You could arm your employees with inexpensive hand lenses or loops so they can look at the leading edge veins on the swarmer's wings. I teach that often in my termite classes. Or even look at soldiers' mandibles or pronotums to get some positive IDs. It would be good to place pictures of all of the various species that you might work with. I know different parts of the country have different termite species active, so it'd be good to get some photographs of the species, get some photographs of some identifying characteristics, and then place them side by side to form your own manual. Or you could purchase, there's manuals, identification manuals for termite and for a number of other pests available for sale online, lots of different places to get them. Hopefully I'm making some sense. Where I live, we have dry woods, damp woods, eastern subs, Formosans, Asian termites, and the tree termite, and possibly others. So proper identification is crucial. And for me, I like simple, simple, simple. So simple ID keys tend to work the best. So for me, I like to focus on the wing veins, the leading edge veins. I like to focus on size and some other characteristics like for the swarmer's wings, are they covered in fine hairs, or would you describe them as bald? Or let's see, more stuff for termite. For inspection and application training tips, I would suggest Googling, like we talked about, some common construction types in your area and printing out the pictures. So one of my slides, like we mentioned, showed a couple of examples, but there's a lot online. And as always, use visuals like the pictures and the drawings from reputable sources. And so get them from like universities, or really check up to make sure that where you're getting them from is a reputable source and they know what they're talking about. And if you're using them, again, for more than your own internal training, be sure you're not infringing on any copyrights. Hands-on training is great, like digging trenches, teaching them how to drill slabs, probing to find the top of the footer. That's a big one. Letting your technicians know what like concrete overpour is, or slag, I think is sometimes what it's called, is also very important, because it can, if you're using liquids, it could stop your treatment from getting further down in the soil profile. And also you might mistake it when you're digging a trench or even rodding. You might mistake it for the top of the footer, and then you're not actually putting out the the right amount of product to get to the top of the footer if you're using liquids. If you're baiting or doing other treatments, touching base with the companies that produce the products you use would be great. and they all might actually, especially like with baiting, they might have their own installation guides to follow, so that would be helpful. And then always reviewing labels and making sure your technicians understand the importance of rates and volumes and inspection techniques. And last but not least, brush up on your math skills at least a couple times a year, because math is a really big part of what we do. Even though I think some people tend to downplay it, I'm doing math on a daily basis, and I'm sure you all are too. So hopefully that provided some tips for termites.
Yeah, I would say that's a very thorough answer to that question. We've got a couple more, and I think we've got about 10 minutes left, so we've got time for these. This question, I know SOPs and training manuals can be different or are different from one another. In addition to regular training meetings with my company, would you suggest reviewing the SOPs on a one-on-one basis with each employee? And if so, how often would you recommend one-on-one meetings?
Yes, and absolutely. This is a great question. Absolutely. Reviewing the SOPs that pertain to each individual's job, because SOPs, they don't have to just be what we do in the field. You could have an SOP on answering the phone. You could have an SOP on handling an irate customer. They can run the gamut. So don't get overwhelmed thinking you have to write one for absolutely every little thing, but just reviewing the SOPs that might pertain to an individual's job description one-on-one, that would be a great way to reinforce their understanding of what's expected of them. And we all want to know what is expected of us. What is our role? Please help us define it. So it'll also provide some time, I would think, if you're meeting one-on-one with people, that's awesome. It would give them the time to bring up some possible issues they've been facing, or some questions that they might not want to bring up in group training meetings. And I think that probably happens a lot. People would be afraid to ask a question in a group, but they might be more open with you one-on-one. As far as the frequency, I would say 2 to 4 times a year. That's just me guessing. It would all depend on the number of technicians you have and how many managers maybe they're spread out across, and how much of your own time or your service manager's time or schedule there is. So I say, the more the better, but don't overwhelm yourself or them with one-on-ones. But I do think they're super important. And then one last thing, I wouldn't restrict these meetings or reviews, these one-on-ones to just your technicians. I think it'd be great to also do them with your customer service reps, your salespeople, anyone else in the company really that you think would benefit from it. It's really nice to review these things from time to time, and you never know. Heck, you might even have some people, wanting to grow and take on more responsibilities, and they might feel, more willing to open up about that in a one-on-one meeting. So I applaud that question. Awesome.
All right. We've got one more here. Might be a little difficult to answer without endorsing a specific product, but we'll throw it at you anyway and see what you can do with it. Is there any software to help make application maps or diagrams?
I am not a software expert, to be honest. And I could throw out some names that I see at the trade shows that I go to. I would venture to guess that yes, there are software companies and packages available, and I would probably start with talking to any of your fellow friends in the business and maybe doing an informal poll of what they use, or you could use SurveyMonkey.com like I do, and you could survey your surrounding friends who are also in the business or other PMPs maybe that you don't compete with across the country, and see what they might be using, because maybe they've had experience with one and they didn't like it, or another that they did. So I guess as a weird answer to that question, yes, there are programs out there, but I'm not quite sure which one would be the best to fit you specifically.
Well, I would say you handled that question pretty well. We don't have any more questions lined up from listeners. Is there anything else you would like to add, Marie?
No, I really hope everybody enjoyed it. I mean, this was more of a business topic, if you will. So hopefully they like it. If not, please let me know, and I can custom tailor back to whatever would make everyone happy.
All right. Well, I think that does it for us. We want to thank Marie Knox again on behalf of PMP Magazine. We thank you for this webinar, and hope everyone found it educational. And that will be it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks, Will. And thank you, everyone, for attending our Tech Training Bad Habits Die Hard webinar. A recording of this webinar will be posted on the Pest Management Professional website, and a reminder will be emailed to you 2 weeks from today. Please visit mypmp.net for future events like this one. Thank you for attending, and have a great afternoon.